Hi, I'm Denis, welcome back to my channel DMaker. If you haven't yet, remember to follow my Instagram account to get to know some of the ongoing and future projects. In today's video I will show you how to make a mobile wine cellar. It was made to be part of an existing closet where one of the doors will be an extractable wine cellar. The only three requirements I had were that it had to be mobile, it had to hold around 80 bottles, and it should have the capacity to hold larger bottles like the 1.5 liters Magnum bottle. Now enough talking and let's dive into the video. The idea of this project was to use a free space on an existing closet to install an extractable wine cellar. It will be able to store 16 large bottles, 54 normal bottles and 22 small bottles, with a total of 92 bottles. For the main structure I used Norway Spruce and the main beams have a section of 7 by 7 centimeters. I cut them to the desired lengths using the miter saw and then planed all the pieces in the jointer planer combo machine. By passing the pieces through the jointer, I was not only making it flat but also removing the rounded corners. After planing all the pieces, I will start making the cuts for the joints, and for that I use the miter saw and set its cutting depth in order to roughly cut the half-lap joints. I break the small slices with the mallet, cut the remaining with the miter saw, and finally use the chisel to make it flat and precise. Then I use the already made lap joint to mark the other cuts in the matching piece. This piece will have a rebate on the other side as well, and I will explain that later in the video. This time I use the table saw just to show a different option to make the same cuts, and also because this one produces a lot less sawdust. But I make it in several passes just to be safer. Then I use a Japanese flush cutting saw to remove the excess. This is a really handy tool and one of my favorites. I'll leave a link in the description for where to get this tool. As you might know, there are different ways and tools for doing the same job in woodworking, and this time I'm using the chisel. After cutting all the joints, it's time to test fit the entire structure. This was the reason for the second rebate. I decided to have a small reinforcement here since this structure will be dealing with a lot of weight from the bottles. I used a Ryoba Japanese spool saw to help making the half lap joint. Then remove the excess with a large chisel. To create the matching lap joint, I used the miter saw and the band saw. The structure is now ready, but before assembling everything together, I'll mark the location of the vertical studs for holding the bottles and make the corresponding cuts. I make the cuts using the miter saw, making sure I do the same cut on every board first to avoid any misalignments in the future. The small grooves are easily finished with a screwdriver and a chisel. Now to assemble and glue everything together, I use the help of a pair of ratchet straps together with clamps. Making sure that everything is square as it should. Since this joint is not the strongest, I reinforced it with a hardwood dowel insert, and I chose to use a dark wood to make a beautiful contrast. I had to sand it a little bit to make sure it fits the hole, and I also made a few grooves with a hand saw to help with the glue. For the reinforcement bracket I will also use a dowel, but this time it will be hidden. After drilling the holes for the dowels in one side, I used the small dowel marker to mark the exact location of the dowel in the other side. This is a good and cheap accessory to have. I'll leave a link in the description for the ones I use. Now it's time to choose the boards for the vertical studs, and I'm careful enough to try to avoid knots and cracks as much as I can. I cut all the boards to size in my homemade table saw. Follow the above link if you want to know how I made it. After planing the boards to the same thickness and width, I assemble them in the main structure to test the fit. There will be 2 brackets at half height to make sure the boards don't bend, and here I'm marking each board's exact location. I cut the slots in my table saw using my homemade crosscut jig. I use some temporary spacers to make sure the bracket is in its position and mark the location of the corresponding cuts in the vertical studs. I use the router to open the groove in the main structure. Now it's time to make all the small strips that will hold the bottles. I do that using the table saw. A lot of cuts later, I have 200 pieces to plane and adjust to its final thickness using the jointer planer combo machine. A few hours later, I round one corner of each strip so that it holds the edge longer and to make the sliding of the bottles smoother. It's time to fix the strips to the structure, and for that I use wood glue and nails, together with a scrap board to act as a spacer for the strips. To attach the strips to the vertical studs, I start by mounting the studs to the structure and attaching the bottom and middle strips. Then I carefully slide the two now connected vertical studs out and attach the remaining strips outside. After installing all the strips, it's time to apply the clear varnish. And this will be done before assembling everything together. I have to be careful though, and seal the parts that will later need to be glued before applying any varnish. Applying varnish to all these strips, making sure I cover every single part, is definitely the most tedious job of this project. After the varnish has dried, I can remove all the sealing and finally assemble everything together using wood glue. Here you can clearly see why I had to use this bracket. Now I can slightly sand the outside using the random orbital sander and the medium fine grit sandpaper. In order for the cellar to be extractable, I have to install wheels on the bottom, and I chose to install non-swivel casters since the movement will only be in one direction. The final cellar is finished and ready to be installed in the customer premises. To make sure the cellar movement is limited and parallel to the wall, I use some heavy-duty long drawer slides with total extraction. I use a piece of wood as a spacer between the wall and the slide. The movement was quite okay, but I decided to install a second slide just to be on the safe side.
The final result worked very well and the customer is quite happy. I think he will have enough space to store all of his bottles and they will be easily accessible by just pulling the cellar out.
In the future, the next thing to do will be installing a LED strip inside in order to have more light and give it that final touch. I hope you enjoyed the video and please hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe the channel. Be sure to follow my Instagram account to help me grow on that platform as well. That's all for now, thanks for watching and remember, you can build it.